Hello and welcome to AT Talks, the Assistive Technology Podcast, your backseat driver, your road trip buddy, and instant pocket mentor for the times you need a refresher. I'm Tammy.
And I'm Kate, and we are excited to welcome you into our digital space. We hope through this podcast you will learn more about specific assistive technology and its place in your allied health practice.
We hope you learn new things, solidify information you already know, and maintain a reciprocal partnership by asking questions through our DMs. Based off the discussion in part 1, a variety of questions have come up from our listeners, and we were excited to have Robyn Guthrie back in the virtual podcast room to answer a few of your questions.
Today we're continuing our discussion about assistive technology. The aim for this episode is for us to answer your questions that arose from the previous episode. If you have already listened to part 1, you would have met our lovely guest Robyn. With 27 years of occupational therapy experience across a wide number of areas within the healthcare and disability sectors, we welcome Robyn back to speak on this podcast, coming to us virtually from Melbourne. Thank you again for your time. Hi, Robyn.
Hi, Kate and Tammy. Lovely to see you or hear you, speak to you again. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited to hear what the questions are that people have sent in.
Wonderful. We have our first question from our listener, Kate.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the first questions was, what requirements are considered when evaluating what AT device you would use for a client?
Excellent question. So I guess from the professional perspective, you would be looking at some of the models of practice to ensure that you're maintaining a very evidence-based approach to your process of recommending assistive technology products. And so we had a quick chat before about one of the models that you've been introduced to, which is the person, environment and occupation, the PEO model of practice. And so I guess when you're asking me about what are the requirements and what is considered, you are very much looking at doing a very thorough assessment of the person and including them very much in this process. They have to be always at the center of your evaluation process. So you would look at their physical, cognitive, cultural, emotional needs and functional limitations. Then you would look at their environment. So very much looking at where they're wanting to complete the tasks that you're going to be completing. So the physical setup, but also the team of support around them. So their family or their support workers. And then you're going to be looking at the task that they're wanting to complete. So is it personal care? Is it mobility? Is it accessing the community? And then you would go away after you've completed your very thorough assessment and you would start to investigate and look into the options that you think would, well, I guess the first step is to evaluate the need and what are you going to be looking for in a piece of technology. So what are the actual features of that product that you require for that person and their environment and their team and their function. And so going back and looking at different suppliers and looking at different websites and with your own knowledge and asking people about what would be a good product to support that person with that task. Again, evidence base is really important. So really looking at what you can find in the evidence around the type of equipment that would be the most appropriate. And then the next step is making sure that you narrow down the options for that person with that equipment or that product. And then trialing that product in the person's environment is a key feature of your process because you know, so many things can go wrong. You just have to make sure that you actually eyeball and see that person in that environment with that product and ensure that you've considered every aspect from the dimensions to how they'll go with it when they're tired, what type of training the support people need to be able to use that equipment in that environment. And yes, so all the training support needs. And then you would have to go off, and depending on who would be funding that product, you would have specific requirements in the funding. So whether it's NDIS or it's for somebody with an aged care package, or here in Victoria, it's the Transport Accident Commission. In New South Wales, it's iCare. There's many, many, many different funding bodies that you need to look at their paperwork that they need you to submit for funding, and try and integrate your own processing and your own models of practice that you've been using for that assistive technology. That clear documentation is really important, with very clear outcome measures and functional goals that you want to achieve with that product. And the outcome measures are really important, but each one of those could be another podcast, so I don't want to go into too much detail with that. But there's, particularly for the very complex equipment like powered wheelchairs, there's some terrific outcome measures like the POMO DAT that you can look up and utilize to ensure that you're, really meeting the evidence and being clear about your recommendations. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's definitely a lot to consider when acknowledging like assistive technology and thinking about the requirements. So something that, these things definitely make such a great clinician and practitioner for those people that are evaluating the assistive technology, because there is so much encapsulated with that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That was very insightful. I guess the next question, from your experience as you have been working in the field for a long time, what has been the most common assistive technology device that you've recommended regularly, and why would that be? It could be a few different answers here. I know it depends on the person, but if you have any regular ones, that would be great to know.
So it's a big question, and I guess just, anecdotally, depending on the area that I'm working in. So for example, in aged care work that I do, quite regularly you're looking at bathroom modifications, because someone, it's very important for them to maintain their personal hygiene and to be as independent as they can be. So shower chairs and handrails and stepless shower bases and that kind of thing is a pretty common one in that particular space, because we're wanting to make sure that person has the opportunity to stay at home for as long as they possibly can. So that's quite a common area of practice for OTs in that area. I guess the other one in my acquired brain injury and spinal cord injury practice is complex power wheelchairs. But I think, having that discussion about what's the most common one, we had a chat about the fact that there's not really a most common one, because as a practitioner, it's really important to make sure that you're always looking at the emerging technology and seeing what's available out there. And even when somebody's been a user of a power wheelchair for a long time, because that emerging technology may not be something that they're coming across all the time, it's important to ensure that they have the opportunity to try new things and to look at different features, and they may end up looking at a completely different power chair from the one that they've had for a long time that they initially thought they just wanted to replace. So my point there is that even if you are coming across the same type of equipment that you're recommending, it's so important to maintain very good and broad knowledge about the new and emerging features and products that are becoming available on the market, to give the people you're working with the best opportunity with that. Does that answer your question in a sort of roundabout way?
Definitely. And I think, like you mentioned before, with acknowledging PEO, it's going back to that client-centered or person-centered, and keeping in mind that each person is super unique, and all their different circumstances will change. Yeah, even if
exactly.
Using that wheelchair example, if they went in thinking they would want it, it's nice that you will be then providing them with alternatives as well.
Yes. And just important to note there how important it is to ensure that you bring everyone else along for that journey with you. So the person is obviously the most important, but the equipment suppliers, engage them in the process, the other clinicians who are involved, the physios, the family, the carers if they're living in supported accommodation, that kind of thing. So again, just emphasising the importance of that sort of collaborative approach.
Yes, and all requirements that need to be considered again. Our last question for this episode, unless there are ones that come up for us, is what would be your advice for a practitioner if they were asked to recommend complex assistive technology despite it being out of their own level of capacity or competency?
Another very good question, because I think we're all faced with that at different points in our careers. And as a as a novice coming, or as a new graduate coming out of university, you often will move into supportive environments like rehab hospitals or acute settings or community health settings, where you do have a lot of clinical or practitioner support around you for each of the decisions and recommendations that you're making. As your career progresses, you may start to specialize in an area, or get a new job in a different area where you you do have to learn new skills around assistive technology and home modifications and that whole broad spectrum of skills. And so I guess my biggest advice would be to ensure that you yourself reflect on your own level of competency with different areas of assistive technology, and have a very good, clear, honest reflection on that. And if you don't feel that you have the skills for that particular product, then you must seek support with that. So it's important to keep abreast of what the technology is, but piecing all of those factors together does take experience and it does take knowledge. And whilst I wouldn't put people off, because we all have stretch goals around what we want to achieve, and that's fantastic to try different areas and to be interested in new areas, but I think it's very important to consider ongoing CPD. Mentoring podcasts are another one to make sure that you keep up to date with that kind of support that's easy and can fit into your daily practice. Making sure that you read OT journals, that you keep on top of things that are new, and that if you do feel that you need more support, maybe a mentor in a specific area might be something that you can look for through the OT Association. They have Mentor Link, and they have you can contact them and say, I need somebody who has experience, say, in home modifications, who can help me to start progressing from minor home mods to more complex home mods. But I guess the biggest takeaway is to just be very clear that in your podcast, it is about confidence, and I think it's very important to have confidence, but it is very also important to understand your competence and your capacity to complete these reviews to ensure that you have good outcomes, that the client has, obviously the client is the first one who has to have the good outcomes, but you as a healthcare practitioner want to ensure that you're working with best practice and that you have that competency and that knowledge and skill base to be able to provide those complex recommendations.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And I think these are definitely things that we all need to consider going forward, and continue to encourage everyone to do so if they're first year out or 10 years into their occupational therapist or allied health practice. For sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to today's episode. However you're listening to this podcast or whatever time of day it is, we hope it has sparked some interest for you and helped you understand more about prescription, assessment and considerations surrounding assistive technology. It was so interesting to hear Robyn's experience with common prescription of AT and her opinion of the reasoning for this. Robyn, thank you so much for your time on both of these episodes. We hope you enjoyed this experience.
Thank you very much, Kate and Tammy. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that I have sparked a bit of enthusiasm and passion for AT. I think we live in a very exciting time when it comes to new and emerging technology, and as OTs, we're very much at the forefront of how these technologies can be integrated into the people we work with in their lives, and to make it a more meaningful, fulfilling life. And really, at the end of the day, if we can use AT to do that, then we have wonderful careers ahead of us. So all the very best to all your listeners.
Thank you so much. That's really encouraging to hear that. If there are further questions that have risen from this conversation with Robyn, please contact us through the details in the body description. Furthermore, if there are other topics you wish for us to discuss, or you yourself want to get involved and be a guest just like Robyn on one of our podcasts, please contact us.
We look forward to hearing from a new guest speaker in the next episode and hope you will listen with us.
Bye for now.